Okay, let's do it. Hi, welcome. My name is Adam Spisak and this is Red, Green and Blue. Red, Green and Blue is a design essay series in which I'm going to look at different aspects of design, different ideas of creativity, just art in general, and just things that I'm passionate about. I love design and art. I've been an artist for 25 years. One of my favorite things to do as an artist is to understand how something is made and why it's made. I think why it's made, it's actually more interesting than how. Because finding how something is made is more a technical thing that it's always easier to look at than trying to find why something is made. I think creativity as a why is always something that has a deep interest for me. And in this video series, we're going to look at how different ideas and design can connect, how you can grow by looking at different disciplines. I'm a massive movie fan. I love video games. I have been playing video games for roughly 35 years. Yes, I am that old. I might not look it. I moisturize. But I love looking at design and how design helps art. I also know that it's not always very easy to be creative and stay creative, and things like creative block or just burnout are a real thing that can happen, and they happen to everyone, depending on your approach and your attitude. They can happen more or less regularly. It's something that I think as an artist it's very important to be mindful of. In this video, we're going to look at how getting organized can help you improve your creativity, can help you manage your creative blocks, but can also help you be long-term creative, which is how to do something for more than a couple of years or a few months, but how to do a design job, like in my case, for 25 years, and how to be a designer and still feel creative after a very long time, right? And I really believe that being organized is a key idea on getting better with your work and improving your discipline, which I think will lead you to far less stress and getting more happy in general. I think being able to be more disciplined and organized with your work can lead you to far less stress and kind of anxiety around your work. So in this video, we're going to look at how I approach some of the ideas in that context. We're going to look at things like art versus design and design versus art. I think there's this idea that some people might have. I don't think it's a common thing, but it happens. I've noticed it with certain artists where how being a designer and an artist are two different things, which I don't think that line is that clear. I think it's in most cases you want to be both. We're going to look at creative blocks and how being organized can help with creative blocks, give you a very almost a limitless limitless well of ideas. It can help you with your spontaneous creativity, because having notes and being organized can lead you to just having more to look at and get more creative quickly and kind of speedball ideas as well. Then we're going to look at things like practical solutions, which one of them is Creative Bucket. The Creative Bucket is an idea for organizing yourself around notes, research, and references. The three coexist and can really make you far more creative artists. So we're going to look at that as well. We will also look at the tools that I use and why I use them. I think it's important to find a good tool that can help you with your creativity, because organizing yourself around something like a tool, if it's a note-making tool or if it's even a notepad, can really help you improve your discipline as well, because taking notes can be really great into finding clarity of ideas, sharpening your ideas, but also keeping track of things. And what I love about taking visual notes, using software for that, is that you can also look at your kind of mind map and things that you did before and how you did them. And I think that can also help you see where you've been, where you're going, maybe make some conscious decisions about where you want to go next and bring to the table. And obviously in this case, finding a tool is very useful. So let's do it. Okay, so let me just start this section from something that I've noticed when I talk about being organized as an artist, is that kind of conversation between art and design, right? Art versus design, actually. So like two different groups and they sit on different sides. One is design, which is utilitarian and focus on providing specific value. And the other one is art, which is more about self-expression, but essentially that's what they mean. One is kind of about you, the other one is about how it's used and how it's useful to others, right? I'm not a big fan of that attitude. It's because it draws a line between art and design in a way that's not very organic, right? Like most things aren't just one thing, right? Like great design could be a piece of art. Now, on the other side is art, and that can be, a very vast topic because obviously it covers anything from actual sculptures and paintings and, cave drawings and things like that, all the way to digital art these days and 3D art and, even AI art and things like that. So there's always different aspects to how you approach it. But one of the things that I always struggle with is when people say they're one, not the other, right? Like I always looked at my work as a creative output that is funneled towards what I'm trying to achieve, right? Like if I want to do a piece of art that's going to be useful to the client, then it's really more of a design art, right? Like I look at a cover for a video game or I look at a poster and I go, what is the part of that topic that I want to include? And that's a very design-driven attitude. But it doesn't really compromise my ideas in the aspect of the art, how I'm going to execute on the art aspects of it, right? And I think this is very important to start looking at your work as both. Then you see that just think about yourself as an artist and almost going against the idea of being a designer is that you are excluding the idea of, improvement, like vastly speaking, right? Like being able to be critiqued and challenged and things like that can make an artist that's good an excellent artist, like all just beyond whatever, right? Like because what's going to happen is as long as that feedback will help you grow, you're going to become more effective at what you're trying to convey. And which means in many ways, this is exactly what design is, right? Design is about looking at problems and trying to figure them out so that next time when you come back to the same problem, you're much better, you're much more effective, you're much more efficient and all that great stuff. I think people that don't embrace that don't really grow as an artist. Like they might be good, they will make some progress, but sometimes you go back to their Instagram or a page or whatever it is and you look at their work in like a span of 4 or 5 years and it doesn't seem like a work that evolved. And I don't mean just like, obviously people can follow a specific style or explore and things like that. But if you're a digital artist and looking at work that doesn't necessarily have an aspect of improvement, like you might have the same topic, but maybe you deepen your understanding of it, right? Because you mentally said, okay, this is what's happening. I need to kind of go deeper into that topic. And that also maybe made your skill set in that aspect more efficient. So that's why I think it's important to look at art and design as two disciplines that have a very big crossover and almost as you looking left and right to which one you're directing your attention, right? Because I think it's really important to then be able to say, I can learn from feedback, I can learn from my own experiences in terms of, skill sets and apply them to art, obviously, but knowing when to focus on design versus art will help you work with the clients as well. So it isn't just a skill for internal growth. It's a skill that will make you grow more efficiently, as someone who wants to kind of make a living as well of art and wants to deliver things, and wants to kind of get into a habit of starting and finishing things, which is again, something that I think is important. So maybe let me just start from a quick idea that I kind of want to put out there because I've seen this before, which is getting stuck, like having a creative block and how to get unstuck. And this is an interesting idea because I think no one really has an answer. This is one of those topics that people like, you ask someone, they go, oh, just go for a walk, whatever. So you ask someone else, they go, oh, just, do whatever, go to the gym or, walk your dog or, go to a park and feed some ducks, which I think is all, those are all good ideas. I mean, you should do them either way. But what I'm saying is like, I don't think that's necessarily always like the answer, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, is it really helping? Because I know myself and, one of the things that I hate when I get stuck is if I actually take a break of what I'm doing, I feel like I lost time and now I'm pissed off in the park. Like I'm in the park, I'm like, I don't want to be in a fucking park now. I want to make that Batman thing that I'm making and I want to finish it or, something like that. So for me, taking breaks, if I feel like I'm going to get stuck is tricky because I feel like I actually wasted time now actively even more in a park, which is weird because I actually, love parks and stuff. Not like a crazy person, just normally just like, just for a walk. I have a dog. That's why. But anyway, so what's interesting is that like you don't have to get stuck as often as you think you are. And I think this is why, getting organized can be really helpful for not getting stuck in the first place. And then if you get stuck, in really finding a quick ways and efficient ways on getting unstuck, you know what I mean? Because it's one of those things where I think it could also be like, I know it's just everyone is different, so you might find that taking a break helps you. Going to play a video game, watching a movie can help you, and sometimes it can, but for me personally, it just doesn't, right? So what helps me is knowing steps around the idea. Like if I'm making an artwork and I have an idea for, let's say, a samurai, and I get stuck somewhere in that process, right? Like maybe I have a character, but I don't know exactly the background. Having notes and being organized can often, like in many times, and I mean this is something that I can't express how often, get you unstuck immediately, because you read your notes and you go, oh yeah, there was that shot from John Wick, whatever, like that I liked, that would be perfect for this setup or something like that. And having those notes, having that kind of element in your kind of brain that you have notes and there's some bookkeeping happening to you on your project, can really get you unstuck immediately, or even not get you stuck in the first place, because you're constantly gonna have an idea of what's next. Like if you get stuck at that point, you are probably just physically tired. Like it's you're working all day and now you just kind of maybe not seeing the idea clearly. That obviously that can happen as well. But I think one of the things that I like this, it's because it helps me not get stuck, and it's just a good tool to have to reignite your creativity. The other thing I think it's interesting is that getting organized is such a amazing way on not having to not getting stuck. That's what I wanted to say in English, sorry. Which is not what I want to say at all. Why am I saying getting stuck? Okay. We're going to cut this a few times here because I'm just rambling. Okay, let's go back to it. So one of the things that I see that happens quite a lot, that happened to me, which is you often have a great idea and you lose the idea. So one of the benefits of getting organized is just being able to track the ideas you want to work on that are exciting to you at that moment, that that they come to you. Because I think one of the things that I've seen quite a lot, and happens to many of my friends, I know it's a known thing for many artists, and it happened to me before as well. I would sit down in the evening or in the afternoon to work, and I would think to myself, what was that idea? Was the Batman? What was he doing? Like then I was like, oh shit. Oh no, it wasn't. Oh, it was Deadpool. Was it? And so then you kind of go like, oh no, and obviously depending on the idea, you can actually completely lose what made it really interesting and fun, right? And so one of the things that I really enjoy about this process is that being organized made me really sharp with making notes, and sharp with kind of getting the idea down as it happens. Even if I'm in the kitchen and I'm cooking, or I'm in the park with my dogs, I will have a phone out and I will quickly make a note of the idea and maybe take a screenshot, maybe even go on Google it for 30 seconds to Google the idea of an image just quickly. Why I think it's useful is because this is where you're not going to be, sometimes when you sit down, you're going to be like, oh shit, I love this idea and I can't remember what was the core of it. Doing that and getting organized will give you the tools to then say, okay, I actually have it. And you're going to, as you keep going, you're going to get better at finding what makes the idea strong to make a note of. But I think the first step is to get in the habit of actually having that backlog, so that you never get to a place where you go, oh man, I have 5 days now left between client work or something like that. I wish I could do that idea that I had, and then what was that guy? Who was it? Oh, was it like Patrick Stewart? But he's Magneto. What was it? And then you kind of go, oh, maybe you remember glimpses of it, like something in your head kind of sparks up, but it's not really something that gives you an answer, right? Which I think can really be frustrating as an artist, because you feel like, man, I love this idea and now it's shit, I don't remember it. So that's one side of it, right? The other thing is that I think I see quite regularly is that the idea that somehow being organized will impact your creativity in terms of being able to improvise, which I don't think is the case at all. I think, looking at work from a side of improvising and speedballing and brainstorming and however you want to kind of phrase it, is the idea of knowing how to do it and when to do it, and be thoughtful of that process. This is one of the things that I'm going to probably mention in this video a few times, because it's just part of how I think about work as well. Is being thoughtful means when things should and can happen in your work, right? Like if your work requires more technical aspects, that day you're going to be doing more research on that, or kind of focusing on that, or making notes on that, or maybe learning how to do certain simulations or whatever you're doing, right? If it's 3D and stuff like that. But then knowing how to be thoughtful about your work also means like knowing when to let go, when to go, okay, I have all those notes, let me just start at this and see how it goes, and then you start on like a character that's supposed to be a king, and then you do a couple of changes and you go, wow, she's not a king, it's a queen, because the theme now, as you were improvising and when going with your creativity, changed. And that's okay. And that doesn't mean, your notes are now invalid, or that you somehow have to like choose between sticking to your notes or going with your gut. Not at all. It's actually the opposite. If anything, it helps, because if the idea clicks with you, those notes will just make the idea better now, because you're going to still have a backlog of ideas, but having that tool of being organized will give you that extra kind of, it's almost like having like, like when you see a boxer in a ring, that's you improvising, right? But what he's doing is like using all those skills and all the assets that he accumulated. Like he learned how to stay light on his feet, he learned how to throw punches, right? But then at the moment he's using those skills to improvise and to be creative. So just to kind of, for people that are worried that maybe if you really embrace being organized and you're going to lose like creativity in terms of you being spontaneous, that's not the case at all. I would say it's almost the opposite. Like I look at my own work and apply them to that part of my creativity that was just more spontaneous, that I would then have all those elements to be spontaneous about, right? Which leads me to my next point and a break for a sponsor. And we're back after a break. That was obviously no sponsor. I don't know why. But so let me just kind of go back to one of the aspects that I really kind of want to talk about, which is how is organized really helpful, and kind of in a kind of a broader sense, how being organized is a useful skill and why, right? First of all, I think is the mention of keeping track of your ideas, right? Like I mentioned this in a previous segment, but I think being able to like look at your ideas and have them organized means you don't lose the next cool idea you have, right? Like you can always go back to an idea you had yesterday, because you now know how to make notes, you know how to organize yourself, you know how to kind of stay motivated, right? Because you already know you have those tools. So this is one of the things that I think it's important to remember, is that it will just accumulate more ideas, like better ideas as well, which I think is important, because it's going to improve your ideas, right? And I'll mention that in a second in a different kind of aspect. But then it's also useful because it helps you build like a healthy discipline towards your work. Being organized, being kind of structured with your work means you're going to have far better discipline in kind of executing your work and trying to kind of get to a place where you are effective as an artist. And that's a really important trait to have, because as much as you're going to create awesome artworks for yourself, if you work for a client, being effective and efficient is as important as being skilled as a specific art skill. Like you might be an amazing 3D modeler or character designer, if you're not effective and efficient, you are not very useful to the client. And I think that's a really important thing to remember as you go through like your path of art and design and trying to find job and trying to make a living out of this as well. Because I think one of the things that you really will then develop by being organized is the discipline on executing on things, because you will have all those tools, which is having notes, having research, having references and things like that. So I think that's one of the reasons why I think it's it's a really healthy way to like develop your work discipline as well. Going back to this point from the last segment, this doesn't mean you're gonna lose the way to improvise. Improvising is still there, and then the reason I'm going back to improvising is because one of the things that I think is really awesome about getting organized and kind of being organized is the long-term creativity. And by long-term creativity, I mean a long-term creativity, just a long-term, like long-term. But anyway, the reason I mean that means like it's not the same as just being creative, but being long-term creative. It's because once you start working at anything that you love, it happens to many of my friends that love video games, with their career path towards video games, maybe making video games, maybe working for video game companies, maybe making content on YouTube of video games or Twitch. It's very easy to get pumped up and like all like ready to go for the first few weeks or few months or even a couple of years. But once you start getting into a process of making this into a habit, it's very easy to get bored and get discouraged, right? And this is where you might lose that idea to improvise, because it's very hard to improvise if you need to do something as work. And I mean this as need in terms of like, if you want to do this for a living, it can be optional. Like, people, and I'm not trying to obviously discourage people and say, oh, it's like, oh, it's so dreadful, like, oh, no, but it is like any job, knowing how to draw that line between being happy with what you do and also progressing your career or progressing your business or however you're going to look at it. It's the idea of like being creative, right? And improvising is not detached from that. And I think being a long-term creative means knowing how to do this for a long period of time at in different spans and for years, right? Like it means like going into like your 15th or 10th year, or in my case 25 years, and still going, you know what, I actually have so many ideas that I want to make that I don't have enough time throughout the day and a week to make these ideas, like I mean this not in a like, I'm so like, no, it's just I'm organized to the point that I actually have a backlog of ideas because I like what I do. I want to make more of it, and to make more of it, I want to continue liking it, and it's really important to letting yourself to improvise and be creative and free form and all that stuff. But at the same time, you're not going to be able to do this for many years if you don't have a long-term creativity in it. Again, organizing can be beneficial, right? And then at the end, also kind of like to finish the segment about why organizing is helpful, it's also going to be a really useful tool to making you more creative and kind of better, And what I mean by that is once you start getting organized, going into note keeping and bookkeeping and things like that and trying to keep track of things, you'll notice a lot more ideas are sticking. One of my favorite things about this process is that the more you are organized, the more you have a view of your mind, in the sense. So like you can look at things and say, oh, I like this, I did this, and you can go back to certain things and say this worked, this didn't work, which means you actually start going to fueling your creativity with better ideas, more refined ideas, which I think is really important. And I think that's why I think, being organized can make you really creative for a long time. It can make you sharper. It can make your work sharper, right? To a next section, which I call the creative bucket. And this is going to be more practical section, which I'm going to talk about some of my approaches. So yeah, the creative bucket. So creative bucket is a concept that I'm going to try to put a small graphic somewhere here, so it's going to be easy to like think about it. Of like 3 items that I use that are very useful to staying organized and kind of keeping track of things. And those 3 things are taking notes, finding references, and researching. And if you look at them, you might say, well, isn't reference the same as research, or isn't like notes the same as research? And I want to think about this concept more as a kind of like a triangle, right? Like you have your notes here, you have your reference here, and then you have I only have 2 hands, but like you have your research here, right? And at any given point, if you take a pen and start moving it left and right in between the triangle, you'll notice that depending on where you are, there will be an element of crossover, but there also will be elements that they will just keep to themselves, right? Like there's certain elements that will be more useful in one of those aspects. So let me just start from notes. I think is one of those things which is it's very like an umbrella term, but like making notes is just as simple as it sounds. It's just about making notes. And I think one of the reasons it is like often overlooked is because it is just so basically simple. It's making notes and then identifying which ideas are worth taking note of, and like trying to understand why an aspect of your idea is actually worth being in your notes. Not just making notes for the sake of making notes, obviously. Like I'm not obviously assuming that anyone is silly like that, but it's not just that simplistic. It's very simple to look at this and go, yeah, obviously make notes. It's like brush your teeth. But I think one of the reasons that it's useful and overlooked is because once you start making notes, and this is it's not a one single thing, it's an ongoing process, right? So once you start making notes, you're gonna get better at making notes the same you will get better at 3D modeling or basketball or whatever you do, right? Like once you start getting to to the habit of making notes, your notes will improve in quality. What you really want to happen in that specific step of the creative bucket, which is the notes, is that you actually want to look at this and say, okay, this is the idea. How do I describe it? How do I make it, transcribe it to a note that I will remember the same way? Because this is actually what good notes are, right? Like, it's not about saying, oh, I want to make a Batman and just make a note saying ideas and saying, okay, make a Batman artwork. Okay, that could be a note for sure. Like, if that could be one of the notes in your Batman folder. But what you really want to get to, and why I think this is one of those things that it just takes steps to get better at as well, like any design process does. And that is, just while doing it, you're going to improve on what sparks your imagination the same way as the time you had, in your head where you had the idea, which is, if you are like watching a Terminator movie, like you watch the T2, which is a film that everyone should just keep rewatching. Just watch T2. I'm just saying, like, you can't really go wrong with watching T2. But anyway, let's say you're watching a T2. So what is important is, like, learn to make those notes in a way that's going to be very descriptive of that specific idea at that time. If it was a Batman that you had an idea of while you were watching a Terminator movie, like, what made it special? Is it because he's going to be more mechanical? Is it like actually mechanical Batman? Maybe the suit is more mechanical. Keep track of not just the one core idea of making a Batman artwork, because that's going to be just one part of it, right? You want to keep what makes the idea special to you specifically. It's something that no one can give you, and that comes from your own creativity, and keeping track of that as it happens by making notes is like a skill. That's a skill that I would argue is as valid as your 3D skills. Being able to get that idea and narrow it down and make notes of it and be effective with remembering the core of it, it's critical, especially, and this is something like a side note, if you're not a concept artist, if you don't have someone who's a concept artist that works with you, if you're not good at sketching and drawing ideas quickly, like I'm not, because it will give you those tools on, like, identifying the core part of good ideas. So again, I think it's a skill that you're going to train. You're going to start making notes. I'm going to mention a couple of other ideas later on that can be useful for that, but I think just making notes is just something that's going to you're going to get better at. Number one in our bucket. Point two, which is references, right? References is interesting because it's very close to research. Research does a lot of, like, Googling and stuff. But references is really taking your notes, and once you look at your notes and thinking, okay, I need to find references, right? How do you look for references? And this is, again, going back to the quality notes will give you quality ideas to reference from, right? But at the same time, I think one of the important things about looking at references is really not just looking at the idea itself, because it's very easy to say, oh, I want to make a post-apocalypse Batman, and just Google post-apocalypse and just Google post-apocalypse Batman, and then go, oh yeah, I didn't think that he could be on a bike. Yeah. Oh, and then it's like a Mad Max Batman, And I think, don't get me wrong, that can be useful as a step in the process. If you just look at your references as something that's the core idea of the element, it could lead you to, like, the most obvious solution, right? But if you have an idea already, you want to first start from describing this idea in its elements. Like, I know it sounds a bit odd, because why would you not go, okay, a Mad Max but Batman, and then see what happens? That can change the perspective of your own idea. You will start then getting the idea that will basically make you just see it in one way. Versus if you look at your idea and say, okay, if it's like an apocalypse Batman, then maybe first look for, like, the best post-apocalyptic art, or the best post-apocalyptic movies, right? Or video games. And then from that point, you're gonna say, okay, I like the references for the apocalypse now. I think it could be this, or it could be post-apocalypse, like, this will give you more ideas than just Googling Batman Future War. Almost too much inspired, like, in terms of, like, oh, it's like Batman, but someone drew it in a Terminator universe. Start looking more like on Future Wars. You're gonna get an array of ideas that it's far better than just a single idea, because that connection that someone else made will be for you to make. So suddenly that idea grows now into a direction that wasn't there before. And if you would Google Batman Future War, you might get someone else's idea as an answer already. You know what I mean? And it could be a good idea. I'm not saying you shouldn't, but it should be something that you go back to at the end of your reference points. Like sometimes what I do is like when, let's stay with the Batman. I'm a fan, so I just keep going to it as a character. But let's say you actually do this and you say it's a future war, and it's you look for color references, which is the blue tints because you like the blue opening of Terminator 2 and you like maybe the purple lasers and all that stuff. So you look for those references for lighting. And then you maybe look at stuff like, the apocalypse, like generally speaking, and you have all those ideas. As you have all those ideas, it's now okay to say, okay, let's see Batman Future War now. Because then once you have an idea of what the shape is, then you can actually look at other ideas and say, oh, people did this. Actually, I don't like him just being on the brown desert. I actually like my idea better with this being like overgrown again, or oh, someone made it like a Viking Batman. I don't want to make a Viking Batman. I want to make like a Stone Age Batman, like almost like this history went back so far that it's just that bizarre again, like really just like a Fallout level of crazy. And as you keep going through this, as we look at the creative bucket, that each of those elements intersects, it's because you are really working in a triangle that has all those elements in it, and making notes and references can live in one space and can intersect, right? You will sometimes the note will be, oh, it's like the future war, and sometimes it's going to be in the color of the opening of Terminator 2, and you're going to grab a screenshot of the movie and just put a screenshot with those colors in there. So you already have something locked in. So that's why I think, having references done separately as the steps before you Google the whole idea. And yeah, at the core of it, there's the idea that's still yours, because the first inspirations that you found weren't necessarily a solution that was already kind of in place. So that's kind of the ideas on how to use reference. Use your notes and save everything that you find interesting in the topic. As you browse through and as you work on the idea, having many references can only improve your work. It's never gonna impact it negatively, because as long as you stay consistent and organized, kind of what we spoke about before, you will know which part of those ideas are for you and which ones you need to follow, and which ones are kind of like, oh, it's just cool, yeah, I could, it may be somewhere, maybe later on, maybe it could be a detail in the background. So you're going to find a way to use the references. So even if you have many references, I often work on a project, I would have sometimes 50, 60, 80 images that I save referring to that specific character. Like if I look at the Batman character, for example, I would look at many different images of Batman on its own, just see which one I want to make, which version I want to make, which colors do I want to use. So that will just be its own kind of research into the character, right? Then I'm going to do the same research for the environment, maybe if it's the future war, what that means, like what is it? Is it the tech stuff? Is it the colors? Then from there I can say what is the apocalypse part of it, and I'm going to do the same. I'm going to look at cars, and I'm going to look at equipment, and I'm going to look at like landscapes and colors, and that's where your references should kind of go into. And that also leads me to my next section, which is research. Okay, so research. This is interesting because, again, kind of going back to the creative buckets, we have those 3 points. What makes research different from just references and notes is that research is something that should kind of connect your references and your notes in a way that will help you build the idea. If you think about research, think about looking into the idea, but on a second kind of level. Like, what is the idea? You know the top now, it's apocalypse Batman or a future war Batman. What is the second kind of layer underneath, right? This is where I think research really shines, and how I use it, and I think how it's useful is really looking at the idea of describing the details that are important to you. That's like a very specific part of your notes. I mentioned that in notes, to get better at making notes. That is the research part of it. The research part of it is interesting because it will teach you how to refine the idea within the idea. So like if you look at your core idea, like what is it made of, right? And getting better at research means getting better at using certain tools, like getting better at Google, which I know kind of sounds like, dude, it's just Google, like just type the shit and it's gonna find you something. Getting better at learning how to look for things, how to describe things you want to find, because the things you imagine and the things you want to find by your research, and why I think research is such a skill to also grow. Research is a skill that will help you refine what is that you're trying to make and why, right? And if it's used well, it's going to help you with, it's going to be part of your notes, but it's going to help you with your references in many ways. But the best part about research is that it will teach you how to look for things, and that's just a great skill in general. To learn how to use Google, learn how to use different tools, like learn how to look for things on YouTube by describing them better, by describing the things that they represent. So what I mean by that is, if I look at stuff like I'm making a future war Batman, right? Just Googling. As part of my research, I'm going to be going, okay, I want to just future Batman, and then I'm going to be like, okay, future war, and then future war sci-fi. And then so after 2 or 3 phrases, you're like, okay, I looked for most of those phrases now I'm not really seeing what I'm hoping to see, I'm getting something very different. Like I'm seeing a reference from a future war and sci-fi, but it's like maybe has spaceships in it, or maybe has whatever tanks, or people with wings and whatever. It's not what you're looking for, and you're not getting the correct research back from your effort. Now, the way you should look at your research is being able to describe this idea in detail to someone who has no mental picture of it. It's how you should look for that idea in terms of Googling it, right? In terms of your research. Then you should start looking at what makes future war. You're not going to be looking at the basic search now. You're going to be looking at, cybernetics, and start looking into this idea, or maybe, a Fallout style setting. You're going to start looking at, 1950s weapon designs, retro flying cars, Cold War technologies, like things that will give you idea that maybe this specific art will be using. Obviously, the hope with all your references that you're going to be looking for. But it will also give you back to your notes, because now you're gonna have, I want to write this down. Actually, for the next idea, I love this. What if I make a 1950s Batman, but then I'm gonna make a Soviet version, or like that looks more like something that would be designed in Soviet Union, getting good at research will give your creativity another boost, because you're going to start finding ideas better. You're going to find them sharper. You're going to redefine them again. And again, the same as with notes and references. This is I didn't mention this in references much, but this is one of those things that you will get good at as you keep doing it, as you keep going and making, searching for things. Try to be conscious about what you search for. Don't try to search for like the most obvious phrases, because you're going to find the most obvious ideas. You're going to find the ideas that everyone else has. If you start looking at phrases and be thoughtful about your search, your Googling, the skill to kind of go and say, okay, if I look for a gun, how do I describe that gun in a way that's going to be very specific? Not just saying, I want to make a revolver. No, say things that are specific to that design, that can go around that design, at like a time period, at countries, at styles. This is one of the skills, again, will grow as you keep using it, as you keep bettering it. But as you get better at it, pay attention to why you get better at it. How is your search changes? How is your approach to research changes? Because it's not obviously just Googling words, it's thinking about how to research the idea itself. Like what's the, how to break down an idea. Because obviously Googling is one aspect of researching, but the core of the research as well is just looking at it and saying, if I slice it open like an onion, what are the layers that make it? And then identifying those layers is part of your research of going, okay, I need to find this, I need to find this idea, I need to find this idea, I need to shape this. Start growing this skill like you grow your notes better. You better at making notes as a skill. You got better at finding references. And don't rush it. Don't think that you have to be really good and spend hours on doing research and buy yourself a lab coat and a small kind of monocle and just go, ooh, research. You don't. You can just keep going but be thoughtful and be aware of that process that's happening. It will fuse into a certain kind of flow almost, right? Where you're going to be able to do this without thinking. And once you start doing that and it becomes part of your arsenal and your skill set, it will be so organic to you that you won't even think that you're using it. You're going to be naturally making notes, doing research, saving things, organizing things in your work, which we're going to go into a segment about the tools, because I think it's important to kind of also speak about how to actually do it, because I think conceptually speaking, having creative bucket is one thing, but then kind of trying to get organized stuff to use it can be a different challenge. And so now let's talk about the tools. When it comes to tools, I think this is one of those things that I'm going to tell you what I use. I don't think they're the best tools. Well, I don't think they're the worst tools. I don't think they're the best tools. But there's also different tools for different hardware. If you're a Mac user, you might find different tools more useful. If you're a hardcore Windows user, you might find Microsoft Notes, like OneNote and things like that more useful. For me, I use a Windows machine, but I also have a Mac and I have an iPhone. So I use tools that work on those three systems, specifically a mobile app, a desktop app on my laptop, and a PC app that I can use as well. So number one app that I use, Evernote, which is a note-taking tool. I use PureRef, which is a reference tool where you can save images and save screenshots quickly on a virtual canvas. I use obviously Photoshop, where I want to make, maybe I want to kind of tweak the concept quickly in terms of a reference. Maybe it's an image that I want to cut the piece off, so I use that, and I use Google. And the reason it's on the screen is because those are really the tools that you need. And obviously you can swap any of those tools for a different tool. But one of the things that I think is really important is if you look at those tools is you will use them at different steps. And I think it's important to now look at those tools and how they work and what they do. Knowing which of those tools can give you which functionality, I would say probably, or an answer, is really what's going to make it useful. Things like Evernote, and I'm going to try to show a quick overview here of my Evernote and just how I use it. But you can see that with Evernote, what I try to do is really look at stuff like, okay, organize your folders, organize your files, have documents. So Evernote is great for basically having virtual notepad. It is a tool similar to Mac Notes or OneNote, I think it's called, the Microsoft Notes. And it's essentially a tool that helps you create a virtual note. The way I use it, I create a document for each idea. That's how it starts. If it's a Batman that's in the apocalypse, that's how I'm going to create. I'm going to create an apocalypse Batman document. And then once I go through my notes and my research and I try to refine it, I will save the ideas that I want to save into that folder. This could be make more notes and just a bunch of screenshots. And if the idea is bigger and I need to go and say, okay, if one note won't be enough to hold it, that's where I'm going to start looking at PureRef, which is another tool that I use that's also on the screen right now. And PureRef works as a virtual canvas that lets you save the images in a single space so you can look at them at once. Now this tool is great and is useful because what it does is essentially gives you a way to zoom in and out of different group of images. So you can create a bunch of images that could be, Batman helmets. You can save bunch of stuff that could be the bikes that he's gonna have. You can save color references, and then you can save it in one large document that works like a virtual canvas where you can zoom in and out and you can look at things differently, and you can research things visually, because you can then say, okay, if I zoom out, you get a bird's eye view of the project, and then you can say, okay, I like this, or I like these colors more, but with this helmet. So you can get to see stuff at once, which again could be very useful, because sometimes when you just save your images into your Evernote and it's just a bunch of images, you might not get the perspective to go, okay, I actually like this idea of this bike, but maybe he's more cyberpunk now. Google is great because you can obviously Google things, but you can also use Google Drive, which means you can put an app on your phone or your PC, on your Mac, that will sync your files, and one of the files you can sync between your equipment could be PureRef. So I have a PureRef on my Mac, on my MacBook, and I have a PureRef on my PC, and I'll save files there. I'll save it on my Google Drive, and sometimes in the evening, maybe I'm sitting or in the morning, I'm having breakfast, I might just go and say, oh, let me just open that PureRef on my Google Drive because I want to look at those ideas now. And because I have an app on both, I can open that the same way. And again, that's the same way I use Evernote. I have it on my phone, I have it on my PC, I have it on my Mac, and I save my documents so that when I save and it syncs your documents, then I can go back on my Mac or on my phone, even when I walk my dogs, and I can say, oh, actually, let me just look at this idea about Batman. And then I can just think about it. It doesn't have to you have to work on your phone. But maybe if I have an idea in a park, I can make a note, and then I can describe that idea to myself and put it in my notes again to find. So again, this is kind of, it's going to be down to you. You might have tools that you use more, maybe you use Bing or whatever the fuck that thing is called from Microsoft. But then obviously Photoshop here is on the list as well, because I think it's one of those things where I think, but I think Photoshop is a great tool, especially now as it gets the AI support. and sometimes doing a quick sketch. You don't have to think about just a single tool. Think about the ideas that are different, think about why they're different, and then look at those tools and think about how they translate. Is it something that you can Google more? Is it more about going on YouTube and learning things? Is it more about using Photoshop to make a sketch maybe? Or is it like now in a phase where you just want to say things, Evernote and PureRef, and start building like the visual database of things as well, So this is one of the things where I think also finding your tools, it's something that you want to kind of like do for yourself. Like I think it's important part of growing as an artist to just don't look at Evernote because I use Evernote. Look at tools that are for making notes, that are better tools now, that are tools, getting a tool that can hold your notes. If it's Evernote, if it's Figma, or is it like something that's very important to make sure that the tools you're using are pleasant to use. This is kind of a simplistic way of explaining it, but it's important to like use the tools and enjoy using them, because if I don't enjoy making notes in Evernote because it's like the UI is annoying and I'm just struggling with it, I'm not going to be making notes. Like it's a thing that we do as humans. We will just try to avoid a situation or an action or an activity if we find that it's not enjoyable, and not to dumb it down, but it is often the case. So being able to look at this and say, actually, no, I enjoy using Evernote, which I do. I enjoy using PureRef to save my images. I do. If you don't enjoy PureRef, don't use it. If you find that it's not very useful for your specific solution, finding a tool that saves notes is important, I think, because it will give you the core element of getting organized. And I think organizing around something like a specific tool that you can save files from is probably like the most important step here, is because you can't really do this if you don't have some place to store that information, right? Like that's probably my closing thoughts now. Kind of the key takeaway here is to think about being organized as a skill that you grow as an artist. And if you ever want to grow as an artist, you have to start thinking about what makes you better at it, right? Like it's an important skill to have, which is identifying your shortcomings. And getting organized can lead to a better discipline, which can lead to better quality of work, which can lead to less stress. It's a kind of a cycle that I think once you tap into it, it will make you less anxious, it will make you less annoyed, and that will essentially mean that you will not feel like you're hitting that creative wall so often, because you have all those tools now. So as you have all those things now you suddenly are way less stressed, so your anxiety goes down. If you're less anxious and less stressed, your work gets better, because now you can just focus on execution, you can focus on creativity, you can focus on improvising now and kind of free-forming and brainstorming, because you have all that capacity now, because you're not stressed about not knowing what to do. That kind of step when you're an artist and not knowing what to do can be really paralyzing. It is to me. I do this job for a long time, and I still get to a place that I know when I didn't do enough research, it's because I stuck on an idea that should not be that difficult. Like I note this to myself, I'm like, man, this is not a complex idea. Why am I not like just getting on with it? And it just comes down to like just not maybe doing enough research to that for that project, right? That I know then fuels my anxiety. Making sure that you kind of prepare yourself and organize yourself will make every other step better. It will make you more creative. It will make you less anxious. It will make the ideas better, because you're going to be able to refine the idea, make it shine, see what makes it click. It's going to make your personal life better, because you won't have work on your mind 24/7, because you know that you're organized enough that you can take a break. It's going to be fine to go and play a new game that came out, watch a movie, take a break, take a day off with your friends, because now you know that if you go back to it, you have that organizational research, you have the notes, you are organized as fuck. You're gonna be fine, So yeah, that's my closing thought. Be organized as fuck. But anyway, let's stop here, because people that know me know I can talk for hours, and I probably did already talk for hours. I'm gonna try to make other videos a bit shorter and more to the point. I welcome all the feedback, so let me know what you think about the video. Was it useful? Was it not useful? You can find me on Instagram and Twitter. I have a website that's going to be linked below. My name is Spizak. The website is spizak.com. You can find me on Instagram as well. I'm there pretty much 24/7, posting stuff usually about video games and art and ideas about health and things like that I think are important as an individual, to kind of be happy and kind of grow. So let me know what you think, and see you next time.